Wow, this one's a doozy. Get ready to have your mind blown. Mine certainly was over the weekend in putting this video together. Oh my goodness! All right, so for a while now, I've been telling you, I'm hearing around Tinseltown that Discovery isn't going to hold on to Warner Brothers for long. Selling it yet again. They're like, woo, we're going to turn a profit on this. I've been telling you that for a while now, as you might recall. But on Friday, The Hollywood Reporter revealed that the most likely buyer is NBC Universal, and that a deal could start to take shape in April 2024. Why then? Long story short, the acquisition from AT&T would, I guess, officially be complete, and basically that's as early as they could legally start such a discussion. And apparently they are ready to go. So yes, when that story came out, I reached out to several of my sources throughout the weekend, and I was like, what are you hearing? And they were like, it's not a question of if, Grace, it's a question of when NBC Universal buys Warner Brothers. I mean, something could always happen, but this is like when everyone was saying Disney was going to buy Fox. And it happened. Or when I told you that Sony and Disney would reach a deal over Spider-Man. I mean, you never know 100%, but like 99% this is going to happen. And April 2024 is indeed the target date. So that means that Warner Brothers will shockingly go the way of Fox, which Disney, as you might recall, ate in 2019. Very little of that famous studio remains. And while Disney occasionally uses the 20th Century brand and Searchlight is still making awards contenders, that's because Disney, a strong family brand with a very distinct persona, can't make that kind of content, but still wants to benefit from it. So 20th Century basically is the new touchstone. But Universal doesn't need any other brands. So would they keep Warner Brothers? Like, for what? I mean, and the Warner Brothers brand, that future is iffy once NBC Universal swallows it. But as for the employees, you're going to have another huge round of layoffs across the board. Because think of all the redundancies. That's where these layoffs come in. You have companies that do the exact same thing combining, and you don't need to have two people doing the same thing. I mean, the teams might get a little bit bigger, but not that much bigger. So another hallowed Hollywood major will bite the dust. That's incredible. Why is this happening? How can it be allowed to happen? What will happen? And what does this mean for DC? Let's discuss. All right, so once again, it all started with the mouse, or according to those especially who value Hollywood's legacy and history and their jobs, a rat. So when Bob Iger turned Disney into a behemoth, although I greatly respect what Bob Iger has accomplished. I mean, the government let him get away with it. I think, Bob Iger not only changed Disney forever, but he's going to change Hollywood forever. I do wish that these brands wouldn't go away. It's fascinating. I wonder if even Bob Iger understood the true implications of what would happen after he did this. So, he bought Pixar, then he bought Star Wars, then he bought Marvel, then he bought Fox. And then he launched Disney Plus to successfully take on Netflix. Even Netflix is sweating these days because of Disney. And he created an entertainment company so big that no other existing entertainment company, even Netflix, can truly compete with it. So NBC Universal isn't just going to buy Warner Brothers, but everyone else is going to team up. And team up is a very nice way to put it, because the big guys are going to eat all the little guys. And so some people will get very wealthy over this, and even more people, unfortunately and tragically, will lose their jobs. And opportunities, will they proliferate? I mean, the opportunities will probably stay big, but the gatekeepers will be less, which is also, good and bad. The business is changing. So there's rumors, of course, that Paramount, Sherry Redstone wants to sell Paramount, and she's been getting that into shape to sell. And, only so many people can afford to buy these big companies. So what? Amazon, Netflix, maybe, Apple, right? Sony for a long time has been like, anyone want to buy our entertainment division? Somebody probably will. And you're right. Disney, if Disney, I don't think Disney would buy it, but Disney might say, how much do you want for Spider-Man? They're just waiting. They're like, we've already invested so much in it. So that's certainly possible. Someone will buy Lionsgate, like Amazon bought MGM United Artists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like musical chairs, and whoever isn't part of a giant team by the end of all this is probably going to go out of business or just have to liquidate, have a garage sale. And because the government let Disney buy Fox, how can they say no to all these other combinations? Especially because the companies will say, if you don't let us merge, we won't be able to compete with Disney, a monster that you, the government, created. That's a potential lawsuit, scandal, and totally unnecessary because business and government, unfortunately, have always looked out for each other more than their consumers and constituents. And they always play the short game rather than the long game. Or they just don't care, which is probably more likely. What do they care about how Hollywood looks 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now? I mean, a lot of us care, but not anybody that's in control of this. All right, so didn't Zazie want to be a Hollywood mogul? Well, he did, until his Batgirl and HBO Max moves blew up in his face, and suddenly he's not having fun anymore. So he doesn't want to be a Hollywood mogul anymore. He wants his money. I hear AT&T has always wanted Zazie to focus on putting a nice big shiny bow on Warner Brothers so that NBC Universal would buy it. Because remember, you're like, how's AT&T still in this? They still own a ton of Warner Brothers Discovery stock. That was part of the deal. They're still rocking a huge amount of debt over there. So they and Zazie would get a ton of money if NBC Universal were to make this acquisition. So they're very incentivized. And with each budget cut and horrible headline, Comcast CEO Brian Roberts smiles because Zazie is driving down the stock market price. The Warner Brothers Discovery price has plummeted, and that means it's cheaper to acquire. So you will notice that it's also likely. This also explains so many of Zazie's business decisions as of late. Oh my God, wait till you hear this. So that's probably why he isn't making any long-term deals and decisions. Because he's just trying to get rid of debt and make Warner Brothers as lean and mean as possible for NBC Universal to digest. With Dan Lin falling through for the head of DC, and this probably is a big part of why, my bet is now Zazie will never hire a new head of DC Films. The Hollywood Reporter has theorized that Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdi, who oversee all of Warner Brothers films, might just take it over. There might not be anybody who's special and at the head of it, which makes sense. That's why they wanted Walter Hamada to stay on it originally. Because they were like, you just got to stay on until 2024 and keep this thing chugging along until we unload it on NBC Universal. But Walter Hamada was so insulted about what happened with Batgirl, he just wants to get out of there. But again, this all starts to make so much more sense when you understand what's actually happening here. Same thing with the Constantine announcement on Friday. Constantine, making another Constantine movie, is actually brilliant. It's a short-term save, it's a one-off, and it pleases fans. It makes you guys happy without having any plans or promises for the future. How do you not decide if the Snyderverse will continue and have to deal with that? You sidestep it. And that's exactly what the Constantine announcement is. Although I have seen some Snyder fans argue that it is in favor of the Snyderverse. How do you figure, man? All right, so that's also why Zazie's probably spreading out the DC films he already has in the can and insisting on releasing them, because again, he's just buying time till 2024, until NBC Universal takes over. This also makes sense with animation. Zazie seems to have it out for animation in particular over at Warner Brothers, even though he says publicly that he loves theatrical animation. It's like, oh yeah? Prove it. And he's like, I don't have to. And I'm not going to be around long enough to have to as well. Because remember, NBC Universal has 2 animation studios already, Illumination and DreamWorks. Warner Brothers Animation is as useless to them as Blue Sky was to Disney. Do you remember Blue Sky? Same thing. Shocking. Shocking! Lots of promises about folding Blue Sky into Disney Animation. Didn't really happen. It was also revealed on Friday by The Hollywood Reporter that Zazie is now looking to lease Warner Brothers IP to other studios and streaming services. Here, you guys want to play with this? Instead of circling the wagons like Disney has, only using their IP for their studio and streaming service. And let's see if NBC Universal decides to lease any of these IPs, because they're going to end up with them anyway. They already have the TV and streaming rights to Harry Potter through April 2025, which is why HBO Max hasn't been able to publicly develop any Wizarding World content and certainly not fast track it. That problem instantly goes away with this acquisition. And suddenly, NBC Universal can make all the Harry Potter shows they want. Now, this reminds me of how Disney, speaking of Harry Potter, this reminds me of how Disney licensed Pandora from Avatar for its Animal Kingdom theme park, which ended up being a precursor to the Fox deal where they got the franchise, the film franchise itself. Did Roberts, who's been the head of Comcast since 1990, acquiring NBC Universal in 2011, he briefly also tried to get Time Warner Cable, but that's, not the whole thing. But anyway, did he have the foresight to know that putting the Wizarding World deal together for his theme parks would ultimately lead to owning the whole film studio? That would be amazing. He would be an amazing CEO at the level of Bob Iger. Even if that wasn't true, even if he pulls this off, he will become an entertainment legend, which is interesting because right now nobody talks about Brian Roberts. I wonder if he has a Twitter account because the Snyder fans are coming for him. All right, now let's talk about this new Universal empire and what it would look like. Don't I always tell you, Uni is the one that surprisingly comes after Disney and it ends up being their true challenger, and that continues to be the case. So you've got Universal Pictures, of course, and as I said, their animation studios are Illumination and DreamWorks. Now, as for live-action film franchises, they've got the Jurassic movies, Fast and Furious, the Bourne films, if they want to continue with that. They just recently added it to their theme parks. Their horror brand, right? And then with the acquisition of Warner Brothers, they would get DC, Harry Potter Wizarding World, The Matrix, Warner Brothers' horror division, which is also quite successful, the Monsterverse, Hanna-Barbera, basically anything you saw in Space Jam 2. That was like a shopping catalog for Brian Roberts, the Sears catalog for him. And if Comcast wants to keep Warner Brothers games, NBC Universal shut down their own gaming division in 2019, he would also have Mortal Kombat. Keep in mind that these franchises can then also be used in the theme parks. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Where Universal has not only challenged Disney in the past, it was the Wizarding World deal that Disney lost that truly started the theme park wars. But also, the plot thickens, because in the last few years, Universal Studios has been gaining ground on Disney, with NBC Universal aggressively expanding their parks, particularly in Florida. They have that new giant juggernaut about to open. And also, politics and prices have also driven some consumers from Disney to Universal, fascinatingly. And now, with all these other brands, they would be able to have all those brands at the theme parks. Can you imagine? DC attractions, The Matrix, the Monsterverse. I mean, wow, that would be absolutely incredible. It's everything we ever dreamed of. So will you forgive if he doesn't do the Snyderverse? I mean, at what point are you guys going to just let this go? And I'm sure there'll be some of you that will say never, but the question is, how can we get that down to a manageable level? Then all these franchises, including the ones they already have, can be utilized in the streaming space. Now, sure, Peacock sucks, but NBC Universal has HBO Max in the deal. So they're like, we don't care. We just got this great streaming service, which, Discovery is about. Well, I mean, you have to wonder what Discovery is going to do with it. Why would they launch a whole new streaming service? Maybe I guess they'd streamline it and be like, okay, NBC Universal, stick whatever branding you want on this. I wouldn't totally believe anything that they say out of Warner Brothers Discovery anymore, because always look at it and be like, what does this really mean for the NBC Universal Comcast deal that's coming down the pipeline? So NBC Universal would get HBO. That's incredible. Make no mistake, that's another brand that would be extremely valuable to them. NBC Universal, of course, also has its own network already, just like Disney owns ABC. So again, you're having companies finally that are starting to be on the same level. Would NBC Universal also want CNN? Disney has a sports news network, but they don't have their own news network. They have ABC News, I guess. But would NBC Universal want CNN when they already have MSNBC? What would happen to CNN, I think, would be quite interesting, especially since Zazie and his team are in the process of gutting it, with the rumor being that they're either going to make it more neutral or actually lean a little bit conservative, as a counter to MSNBC, which leans in the other direction, or as an attractive property that either Zazie can spin off for another deal, or Brian Roberts can purchase the whole thing and then go sell CNN to somebody else to help offset the cost. Now, speaking of the cost, here's where it gets funny. So how is Brian Roberts going to pay for this? Well, currently, Bob Chapek wants to buy Comcast out of Hulu so that Bob Chapek can fold Hulu into Disney Plus and just have one streaming service, which we also all want to happen. Right? All right, so Chapek and Roberts have recently been communicating via the press. So Bob Chapek said, technically we have to wait until early 2024 to get this train a-moving, but I'd love to be able to buy Hulu now. Although, because streaming services have proliferated so much, I don't think Hulu is worth quite what it used to be. So then Brian Roberts, also in the press, said, hey, we'd love to move up the deal date on this and sell our share back to Disney. But it's still incredibly valuable, and we would accept no less than $27.5 billion. That's the floor that Roberts put on it in the press. Now, of course, they're negotiating. They're always going to go to extremes, but I think that's fascinating, right? Now, look, that's not going to cover it. It cost $71.3 billion for Disney to acquire Fox, but still, every bit helps. And I just find it funny that Disney money would help fund the creation of their biggest competitor yet. But at the same time, would it help Disney greatly? I think streamlining, I think it's crazy that they have all these different streaming services. It would definitely be better to get them all under one account. So I will be very sad to see Warner Brothers fade away. It will be as shocking and sad as seeing what happened to Fox. These are studios that built Hollywood. But in Warner Brothers' case, the company has been so poorly handled in the past few years, rife with ridiculous petty drama, that I don't know if it even could be saved, to be honest with you. We've been talking recently about how are they going to move forward. Well, here's a way to at least sidestep it or make it somebody else's problem. And that becomes the next question. Whether or not this drama will follow the brands and Warner Brothers overall over to NBC Universal. Like, again, will the Snyderverse just haunt DC forever? Will NBC Universal also buy that problem? And if NBC Universal can fix all the creative problems that have plagued these IPs, we're like, come on, fix the DC movies are a mess. The Harry Potter movies are a mess. Just fix them. But Warner Brothers hasn't been able to do it. Could NBC Universal do that? They did, I think, fix Jurassic Park to a degree, right? So maybe, well, let's just see. And are they willing to take the breaks to reset those brands? Or are they going to want to start seeing a return on their investment right away? I mean, even Disney suffered from that. Disney wanted to see a return on their Star Wars investment right away and paid the price for that. So 2024 ain't that far away, and that's when this is all going to start to go down. So we'll find out. What do you think of the future of not just NBC Universal and Warner Brothers, but the rest of Hollywood? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.